Welcome into the Illini Nation pregame show, live from Iowa City. Bret Beherns here and Derek Piper from Illini Inquirer. Derek, we have made it to the regular season finale. It has been a long road to get to this point, dating back to October when they had the exhibition games, and it ends here in Iowa City today with the Illini facing a Hawkeyes team that desperately needs a win on the bubble for the NCAA tournament.
It's going to be Iowa's Super Bowl. As far as the men's side goes, the women's side is drawing a lot more of the attention, the headlines. They, of course, win today in the Big Ten tournament. Women's up there in Minneapolis, so in overtime. So Caitlin Clark Company getting the views. I wonder how many fans made that trip. So this is a sold-out venue. I know that attendance-wise they've kind of been down this year, but sold-out rivalry crowd with Illinois. And, of course, you see a decent amount of orange anytime you come to this building. So they're playing for a ton. They're on Joe Lunardi's first four outline right now. Probably a win-and-in situation for Iowa. Illinois, on the other side, they're secure in terms of their Big Ten tournament seeding. Of course, they're getting into the NCAA tournament, but this is more of a seed line game. They'll need some momentum here to really make a real push to that 3-seed line. We can talk about it, but missed an opportunity by losing at home against Purdue there on Tuesday. But I do think if you win today, get a quad one win, probably you're raising your floor to a 4-seed most likely.
Like right in that 4 consideration, I feel like even if they lose today, do you think they drop to a 5?
Not necessarily.
I feel like they're on that 4 line, like through and through.
Yeah, I know that Bracket Matrix right now has them as the 3rd 4 seed. It depends on who you're really looking at there, but I don't think you drop too far with a loss here, but maybe you do have an early exit at the Big Ten tournament in addition to this. That could put you as a 5, but I do think it's more of those just trying to get in the right pecking order on that 4 line. Of course, trying to make the push for the 3, but you want to, if you're like the top-ranked 4, you might drop the lowest 1 seed in that region. And I think also you want to avoid Kentucky, which they're playing really well right now. Some having them moved up to the 3 line, which I'm sure Illini fans, if they're not going to be a 3, are probably fine with Kentucky being 1.
Yeah, Kentucky wins at Tennessee yesterday in a game they almost blew, but they hang on, and Tennessee likely a 1 seed. These two teams very familiar with each other, played just 15 days ago, and that was a game Illinois won in Champaign, and Illinois has pretty much had their way with Iowa here the last couple of years, trying to make it 7 of 8. Like, this has been a pretty good series. The only loss in that was here last year. So you could say the rivalry's been rekindled here, maybe back to the 90s and 80s for what it was, because Iowa early on in tenure really owned them. Like it's gone back and forth here.
Yeah, for Brad to be 6-6 in this matchup, it shows though, like you're mentioning, they've been able to reel him off here of late. I think maybe he started 1-5 or something like that, and then here recently has really gone on a nice streak. And the lone loss here last year. Outside of that, Illinois put something together there. We're kind of middle of that Kofi Io versus Luka Garza, Joe Wieskamp. Man, I miss those battles. Those were fantastic, high intensity games, and Illinois kind of went on a nice streak there. So I will say this rivalry has provided some thrillers to end the regular season. Those have gone Illinois' way. When you look at Champaign in 2020, Champaign in 2022, of course, when you were able to cut down the nets and win the Big Ten regular season title. But this one is, of course, in Iowa's home building. They've got the most to play for. I do think it will be, just stylistically, high-scoring offenses, a lot of points, and should be really another intense, fun game between these two sides.
Yeah, there's just been so many good players here as of late, right? The Twins, and you mentioned Luka. I just think back to this last really 4-year stretch and just how much fun this has been. The fan bases, of course, we had the Crush Gate last year that happened, right? Like, it just reminds me a lot of what this Iowa-Illinois matchup used to be. And the rivalry is why I said rekindled. I feel like it's kind of back, even though it's been pretty much one-sided early on there 5-6 years ago. Iowa was winning all these games, and then Illinois has come back on strong here as of late. All right, so with this recent game, what do you make of that? Does that favor Iowa? How does Illinois come back and adjust that? And who are you looking out for today, some matchup-wise, from what we saw last game 15 days ago that maybe could translate back to this game?
I think an interesting part of the last game is that both teams didn't really have their stars have their best games. Like Illinois even though Terrence Shannon had 12 points, Marcus Damask had 8, obviously still were able to ring out 95 points. I think the bench was huge in that game. Dane Danger had a nice performance off the bench. Nicola Moretti was a standout in that game, kind of his breakout of the season. And then Amani Hansberry get good minutes as well. Then, oh, by the way, Coleman Hawkins scored 30 points, had 5 assists, 5 steals. So he was crucial in that game. And then, Illinois offensively, we've known they've been top 5 in the country offensive efficiency throughout the year. And Iowa just doesn't get a lot of stops. So Illinois should be able to score at will. I expect a better game out of Terrence, who didn't play very well on Tuesday against Purdue. I will say, as an encouraging stat for Illinois fans, he hasn't had, since February 1st, back-to-back games under 20. So season low 11 points against the Boilermakers. Odds are that he bounces back in this one, although I do think that Josh Dix did a good job guarding him in the first matchup. On the note of the Iowa side, you look at Peyton Sanford playing at an all-league level.
Yeah.
Didn't have his best game against the Illini. I think he was 3 for 11 from the field in that one. Tony Perkins also wasn't very efficient. So those have been their top 2 players, guys that can hurt Illinois. Perkins, of course, in this building last year, 32 points, a season and career high against the Illini. But going back to Josh Dix, a guy that has really been able to emerge of late, 3 straight games of at least 20 points, great mid-range shooter. And I think that as you look at it from Illinois' standpoint, their defensive mindset and philosophy is to force hard twos, tough twos, a lot of those pull-up shots. One thing, though, with Iowa is they're really good at those. Sanford, Perkins, and Josh Dix are really good to get going in the mid-range. And also the transition game for Iowa. They're one of the most productive, if not the most productive, transition offense at the high major level. Illinois has to keep them out of the fast break and running game because they want to play with tempo and get you in space and not allow you to set your defense.
Yeah, remember that game last year here was Perkins went off, right? It was just those pull-ups, man. Like, it was just silky smooth from that 16, 17, 18 feet range, and that crushed Illinois. I mean, that was like a tough pill to swallow last year when he goes for a career high. Excuse me, that was kind of the theme last year, though. Remember that? There was all those guys that went for career highs against Illinois last year. I mean, you probably remember the names more than I do, but like there was several there.
Kobe Brown, I know, was one of those.
Kobe,
Missouri.
yeah, Missouri.
Jalen Pickett.
I think Pickett went off.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Bowie had a heck of a game in
That
Champaign.
was kind of the theme last year. We haven't seen that as much this year. At least it doesn't seem like as much this year. You mentioned the offense. Look, both these teams are one of the best offenses in the country. I saw the totals at like 171. That's ridiculous, man. Like, there's going to be a lot of points scored. At least that's how I would view this coming in. Does Illinois just embrace that and get out and run? Does Brad just go with that and say, okay, well, maybe the defense won't be as potent today? How do you kind of evaluate that?
I think they lean into playing an up-tempo game, as many possessions as possible, and let their offense go. And I think that Illinois is in a comfort zone trying to outscore somebody. I do think that defensively they do need to get key stops, even if it's hard over the course of the entire game. Like, trying to hold Iowa in the 60s or even the 70s might not work. That's a losing battle if you're trying to rely on that. But there was a stretch where you get that separation. I felt like in Champaign, kind of middle of the second half, they were able to really start to get some stops. If you look at the first half, Iowa shot like 64% from the field and got a lot of what they wanted. So you do have to be able to, and I know that Brad coming out of the Purdue game talked a lot about loose balls, grittiness and toughness in those win or lose moments. So I think that that's a thing where Illinois, it might be an up and down shootout, so to speak, for most of the game, but really in the guts of it, when it's winning time, you got to be able to get those rebounds, get those stops. So I think on the whole, you're probably expecting at least a game in the 80s, if not first team to 90 wins. But definitely Brad wants that intensity and grittiness to come back defensively. I thought for the most part, early, especially against Purdue, I thought Illinois played with a little bit extra pop defensively in the first half.
Yeah, I thought they were great.
Terrence did a really good job on Braden Smith. And then, of course, Edey, I mean, you'll have a game against the National Player of the Year where he makes 23 shots to get 28 points. But, of course, the threes they gave up late was a tough pill to swallow. And just over the course of a game, they got to put a full 40-minute effort out there defensively. And Illinois, really over the last 2 months, is still searching for that.
Yeah, and I thought Brad made a great point. He said if you would have told me that you were going to hold Purdue to 77, he would have said they're going to win.
Yeah.
And I think that's spot on. I mean, Purdue also a great offense, and the fact that Illinois held them to 77, like I felt pretty good about that coming out of it, all things considered. The closing time, I think, is still what Brad is most concerned about on the negative side of it. It's just like, okay, well, where is that going to be? We have seen it. We do need to give them some credit. There has been moments this year where we have seen that closing time, but there's just the ones that stick out. And we always remember the ones that you lost that come back to a little bit more of that memory bank. And Purdue, another opportunity there where they had that opportunity to get the quad 1A win that we've been talking about, and we didn't see it. How concerned are you about that late game, scenarios down the stretch? A, who's on the court? I think that's important too. And then who's the guy to go do that, right? Do you trust Marcus now than you maybe even trust Terrence? I mean, all things that I've thought about that they got to figure out here. Derek, there's only 3 guaranteed games left. I mean, it's this Big Ten tournament. You get 1 guarantee, and then you get 1 guarantee in the NCAA tournament. I mean, we're down to 3. That's it for this team.
Yeah, the urgency should be at a premium right now. And for a group that has a lot of, this is your last go, whether it's your grad transfer, your 5th year, or a Coleman who's probably looking to the NBA, I would imagine, at this point in time. So trying to give your best effort, making sure that in those closing times that will define your season, whether you're going to survive in advance or go home. And then after this game, that's all it is. The rest of the way, Big Ten tournament, NCAA tournament. But we knew going into this season that Bret was going to have some options in terms of lineups, rotations. And it is interesting, not necessarily like shocking, that I still feel like he's feeling it out in terms of those late game lineups. And I do think on the whole, with a certain game, given matchups, given situation, are you chasing points? Are you trying to hold on to a lead? Do you need threes? Maybe that means you need Luke Goody out there versus if you're trying to get stops, trying to get rebounds, maybe that's Quincy Guerrier, maybe that's Ty Rodgers. So there has been criticism in terms of some of the buttons that Bret has pushed in those moments. I mean, it's a good problem to have in terms of multiple options, but still I feel like maybe you would have thought that he'd have a 5 that he feels really, really good about in terms of closing the game. I think that's still in flux right now, whether it's going to be Justin Harmon, Goody, and then also Quincy and Ty too. And I think offensively you make a good point. I mean, Marcus has been a killer, man. I mean, he's shown some real stones about him. Wants the ball. He wants to be able to go make a play. I felt like he was the only guy who had a real killer instinct late offensively against Purdue and attacked Edey. I think Terrence was a little timid, and I think it's shared blame, though. I think Terrence needs to be more assertive, but also Illinois has to draw some things up for him to get him going downhill. And I know that Brad told us yesterday that they spent all of Thursday's practice going through late game situations and repping those. So while defense and getting those rebounds that are key was probably a big focus, I think also exploring their offensive game plan and what they want to go to late, probably something they also hit on, and trying to get Terrence some shots, along with Marcus as well.
Yeah, situational type practice is probably pretty good for this team. The point that I make, Derek, is that, look, we're this late in the season, and Brad still feels like he's trying to pull that out of his squad. If that's not there at this point, then when is it going to be there? I think that's a fair question to ask, at least from the outside. And once again, this is all in perspective of they have not been terrible, right? Like, they're still a 22-8 ball club that is a good team. And so I want to keep that in perspective. They're a 4 seed. Think how many years Illini fans would love to be a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. It's not all bad. It's just when your perspective has changed and you expect more, then I think it's fair to also criticize and say, okay, well, how come Quincy Guerrier didn't play much in the second half down the stretch after making 3 first-half threes the other night? I would love to see that type of Quincy, that aggressiveness, that assertive Quincy we saw there. Can he do that for 35 minutes, right? Or if he plays 31, 32 minutes. We really haven't seen that in a month plus. To me, that's going to be key down the stretch here. Quincy has to play at that January level for this team to really succeed in March. And that's just, he's one of my X factors in there.
Yeah, he might be the biggest X factor for this team going into this postseason play, because we've seen what the high points are. A double-double guy, someone that has that motor, that physicality. Defensively, in terms of matchups, I know that he's really made and built for the 4 spot because of his size, because of pretty good athlete. And then, we've seen stretches where he can knock down threes and also drive the ball, get to the rim, and draw some fouls too. So on the whole, really, you look at Shannon, Damask, Hawkins, all pretty consistent. Now you're going to have an off night for one of those guys, sprinkled in there every once in a while, but those guys you've really been able to rely on as a big 3. That Quincy can be that 4th guy. That gives this team a lot of answers and a lot of different ways they can go about it. And I do think it extends their ceiling to another level if you can get that out of him. So yeah, I think that back to what you were saying on the front end of that is it is in relation to expectations, right? And I think that when we evaluate what we've seen offensively, which look, without a point guard, without trying to piece different parts together and made it work, like this is better than we could ever expect in terms of offensive production.
No doubt.
We just know what this team will be capable of. If they can just play average to slightly above average defense, if they can figure out some of the late game moments, and we know this team is capable of a real deep run if they can answer some of these questions. The thing is, you're getting late to answer those, and you don't want to leave a lot of meat on the bone in terms of potential if it's because of a lack of 40-minute effort or a lack of defense or a lack of pushing the right buttons in the lineup. So it's just knowing the urgency and what this team could do, and now excuses time and we'll figure it out later is over. You gotta do it now.
Speaking of urgency, I'm very interested in the first 4 minutes till we get to that first media timeout in this first half. Iowa has to have this game if they're going to get to the big dance. Can Illinois match that? That's something I'm looking for right out of the gate. Can they come out with, I'm going to say nothing to play, but like, look, they should be looking ahead to next week and to the NCAA tournament. That's what fans want. You want to get to that second weekend, but can you close it out well here, right? Can you get to, what would it be, 14 Big Ten wins?
Yeah.
I mean, that's significant in that sense. You're already at 13. It's been a great season so far, but I want to know, like, to me, that's going to tell me a lot about the focus of this team if they can come out and play well at the start. What's something you're looking for here tonight that's going to be a key for Illinois to come out here with a win?
Yeah, I think it's having that defensive intensity like they had against Purdue. I think that would give Illinois a real shot. You don't want to get punched in the mouth early. I think you do expect that wave of emotion. I mean, it's senior night, the sold out crowd, and they're playing for a ton in terms of their NCAA tournament hopes. So similar to Illinois against Purdue, it felt like Illinois didn't necessarily maybe have Purdue on the ropes, but just the momentum was really rolling as Illinois built a double-digit lead there. And I would expect Iowa to have a similar punch about it early. It's whether Illinois can withstand that, fight that back, and then be able to hang in there and be able to win this game. So from Illinois' standpoint, I do think it starts with the defensive side. Can't let Sanford get going. The fact that I thought Marcus Mass did a really good job on him in the first game. He runs off a lot of screens. He really get going for three. Just had a triple-double in this building the last time he was here against Penn State. So he's a guy that can really hurt you. We know what Perkins is capable of. Josh Dix in the mid-range. So like I mentioned earlier, transition defense, just cleaning the glass too. Like Iowa on paper is not a good rebounding team. They've given up a ton of second chance opportunities. It feels like a real area where Illinois can kind of assert their will and control the game. If you can take away some second chance points, which Iowa had 15 of them against Illinois. That's really not a strength of theirs, but Illinois gave those up in Champaign. On the other side, when you do miss shots, cleaning the glass there. So I'm looking for that. But yeah, I think it's the early feeling out process of Iowa's probably going to have the juice. Yeah. Can you just withstand that and then take back control?
Sold out building here. We are at the bottom of this massive hole in the ground in the bowl that is Carver Hawkeye Arena. All right, last time in the regular season here, are you picking Illinois? They're a 1.5-point favorites, Derek Piper. What do you got at 3 keys and a pick? Are they going to win?
Tough game. Really tough game. Toss-up matchup.
Yep.
I didn't pick Illinois.
Okay.
I picked the Hawkeyes 88, Illinois 86. High scoring, tight. I just think that the home environment, the gotta have it mode for Iowa is gonna overcome Illinois, and we'll see though. I'd love to be wrong, and I think Illinois does need to. This would be number one, a really good win on their resume. You know, it's not a quad 1A win, but it's a quad 1, and I think just the time of year when you're trying to find your best basketball, this would be a nice step in the right direction after losing to Purdue, but I have Iowa. Iowa get it done.
All right. My gut tells me Iowa's going to win, but I'm going to pick Illinois. I think they're going to come out. I think they'll be focused after that Purdue game on what they needed to correct. I do think it's going to be high scoring. I'm going to say first to 90 wins, and Illinois is going to win 91-88. I think we're going to see a bunch of points. I think Illinois got the better roster. I think they have the better players, but can they be focused enough to come out and get a win? That is what we are here to see. We will have Brett Underwood's full post-game press conference on this digital channel that you are watching right now, right after the game. Join us for that about 8:15. What do you guys got on the site before we head into the regular season finale?
Got my 3 keys in a pick, as always. You also got Joey Wagner wrote about, had a notebook, hitting on a couple of different angles, but really Grounder would challenging this team to just play with all-out effort. Feels like his team is lacking a little bit there in terms of living up to the standards. He's talked about the thrill of an all-out effort once. They wanted to go out on a high note, leaving it all on the floor. And then Jeremy Warner's had some good coverage, as Joey has as well, of Illini Football Pro Days here recently. So us 3 are all here in Iowa City. We'll have post-game coverage for you, a podcast as well. Check out your guys' stuff also. All
right. We have 12 minutes, 30 seconds on the clock here before this one tips off. And we will see if Illinois can close out its regular season on a high note. For Derek, I'm Bret. Thanks so much for watching the Your Illini Nation pregame show. We will see you back here afterwards for the postgame press conference. Enjoy the game.